with workers, be out in the streets helping to kind of promote the work of Maskosh and kind of build their own skills while they're doing that. And so I think that's something that we try to do through our Worker Center. Again, is we have a leadership institute. It's still kind of a work in progress, but the idea is that we want to kind of figure out how a worker can really be able to share their story, whether it be in front of legislators at the State House, or, if we have media come to an event and they want to hear directly from workers, that they feel comfortable being able to do an interview, do public speaking. We give them a sense of the overall labor movement history. We talk about, all of the different rights they have. And then I think ultimately we try to introduce them to some of the other parts of Maskosh's work so that they feel a little bit more connected to the other issues and the other staff that are working on different issues, but ultimately feel that kind of sense of that, yes, they are all part of this one organization that's ultimately working to make the world a better place for workers in a range of ways.
Great. That was interesting what you said about a sense of the labor movement's history, because that's something I'm going to come back to in a second, is kind of the wider labor movement of which you guys are a part. But before we close about the piece on structure, I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned kind of the Injured Workers Committee and the Mujeres, the Women's Committee.
Yeah.
How often do those groups meet? Because those, when I asked about structure, it's almost like those are kind of under the Worker Center umbrella. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they meet right now. I think they each meet at least once a month, but the communication around other issues or coming out to other events, that happens regularly throughout the month. But they do meet regularly, at least each of those groups once a month, I believe.
Okay. And then what's the kind of structure of the Worker Center itself? Is there a board of the center that's different from Maskosh? Because I know the website.
There is a smaller, I would say, steering committee within the Maskosh Worker Center, and there are 3 leaders of that steering committee that sit on the Maskosh organizational board. And so the board of directors is made up of representatives from our Immigrant Worker Center, our Teens Lead at Work program, folks from our union kind of world. We have a few lawyers in terms of workers' comp that are involved, and then we have other kind of community partners that are on the board as well.
And so I've heard a little bit of talk about kind of different groups, in terms of the youth and women, for instance. How would you say that diversity affects, the diversity of the Worker Center and Maskosh affects the way the organization is run?
I think it's something that has, pushed us to be more multilingual, to kind of better ensure that, the people that we are supposed to be kind of helping and figuring out how do we make their working lives better for them should be at the table sharing directly what those experiences are. And so I think for us, it's definitely forced us to kind of make accommodations at that table, whether it's bringing in interpreters, making sure all of our documents are in both Spanish and English, because we want to be able to make sure that those Worker Center members feel engaged and a part of the larger organizational goals. So I think all of the diversity and the kind of cultural differences that we see through the Worker Center have only helped to make our organization better and stronger, because we are engaging more of those that are being directly impacted right at the table in terms of the decision making, in terms of what we do on a year-to-year basis. So the same thing with the Teens Lead at Work program. We have 4 youth leaders that sit on the board. 2 are former leaders, and then 2 are current leaders. So that's the same idea, that we want to be able to show that our work is thinking about young Black youth in our community, as well as undocumented Latina women. So we want to be able to kind of make sure that all walks of life are kind of considered when thinking about the priorities that we develop here and how we create our work plans.
Okay, great. I want to then move on. We've talked a lot about your organization. You have a lot going on, obviously. I wanted to talk a little about other organizations that you work with in the area that work on workers' rights issues. You've mentioned a little bit, but how do you guys choose partners to work with when you want to go outside?
A lot of it is, people making requests of us, or if we've identified a particular campaign that we feel is directly connected to our mission, we might reach out to that union, that labor council, that organization, and find out if there's an opportunity for us to still kind of be a part of that coalition, or can we chime in on that meeting? And then sometimes we're being asked to come out and support or learn more about a particular campaign. And then that's kind of, where we then develop some of our work plans. We're like, all right, this is obviously a campaign that's focused on safety and health. Let's make sure that whatever it is that they're doing, that we try to kind of keep up with their timeline and be as involved as we can. So I would say it's a mix of both. Sometimes it's, people word of mouth. So people contact us, but a lot of times it's us seeing an article or something on Facebook or learning about a campaign, and we're like, ooh, that's something that is definitely like in our realm. And so we then make the decision to either seek out someone or find a connection to that particular campaign or issue.
So sometimes you guys seek it out and sometimes people come to you.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say it works both ways. We try to find a balance, obviously. And I would say, again, the board of directors kind of helps to create the focus of what we want to do on a year-to-year basis. And so we then figure out, these are the priorities we've set. And so then we then start identifying, again, possible actions or campaigns where we can actually work on some of those goals through the campaigns.
Right. And what kind of role does funding play in terms of selecting partners?
So we have. I would say that it depends. We definitely get some funding that allows us to do, provide training, expertise, create fact sheets for some campaigns or organizations. And so because we've already received that funding, we just do this as part of our work, which we then report back to the funder, the different ways that we've engaged our allies and supported campaigns. And in other instances, sometimes, depending on what level of work is being asked of us, then we might necessarily, or realizing that we don't have technically any funding to do that specific work, we then might go to the organization and then figure out if there's an opportunity to figure out how we get something in return for our work. Because sometimes that is, monetary compensation. Other times it could be visibility with some of their members, or it could be helping us to having them support us at other events. So it ranges in terms of how we make decisions on what campaigns to take on and at what level we can do it. Again, it all comes down to capacity, I think. So we ultimately figure out, if this is something that just makes sense because it's in line with our work, and this organization may not necessarily have all of the funds available to help us do that, we're probably still going to be involved in some capacity. Maybe it might be a little less because we realize we just don't have the time to commit on that level if there isn't something we're necessarily getting back. But again, I think we're ultimately trying to figure out how do we ensure that worker health and safety is something on everyone's radar, and if we can help push and move that through different avenues or different campaigns, that's something that always keeps us open to then figuring out whether we necessarily need funding to do that, or if it just is the right thing to do because it's something that we already have information on, and we want that to just be out there.
Right. So when you think of the partnerships you guys have had, can you think of what good cooperation might look like?
Yeah, I think any good partnership is something where people come to the table and haven't necessarily decided, well, I have already developed an agenda and I simply want this organization to do what I'm asking them to do. I think it's always better to present, something that you have in mind, an idea, and then allow further brainstorming, suggestions to come up collaboratively, because then it's not necessarily one organization managing the campaign or telling you what you can and can't do, but it feels more